The transatlantic slave trade. Millions of black Africans ripped from their homes, shackled, and shipped across the ocean like cargo, all in the name of profit. This was about building empires, amassing obscene wealth, and shaping the geopolitical landscape for centuries to come. Please subscribe to my channel and share this video. Today, we're going to shine a light on the nations that built their fortunes on the backs of enslaved Africans. Watch this video to the end. You will be shocked with the last country. We're talking cold, hard cash, the kind that funded opulent palaces, sprawling empires, and even some of the institutions we still hold in high regard today. We'll examine how much these countries profited, how long this barbarity went on, and just what they did with all that blood money. Spoiler alert, it's not going to be pretty.
Let's start with Portugal, shall we? Those plucky explorers who just loved a good spice trade. But here's the thing about spices. They're not nearly as profitable as human beings. Portugal figured that out early on, kicking off their transatlantic slave trade in the 15th century like it was just another Tuesday. By the time the dust settled, they'd shipped over 4.5 million Africans to their colonies, primarily Brazil, a land practically drowning in sugar plantations. And sugar, my friends, was the white gold of its time. It fueled European cravings and, more importantly, lined Portuguese pockets to the tune of billions in today's money. The kind of money that allowed Portugal to build an empire, stretching from Brazil to Angola to Mozambique. Portugal milked this horrific system for over 3 centuries, from the mid-1400s to the late 1800s. Generations of Portuguese royalty and aristocracy lived lives of unimaginable luxury, all built on the suffering of millions. They built modern Portugal, brick by bloody brick, all thanks to the sweat and blood of enslaved Africans. Now, let's talk about Spain. They might try to sweep their involvement under the rug, but we all know a conquistador when we see one. While Spain didn't personally drag as many Africans across the Atlantic as, say, their Portuguese pals, they were more than happy to put them to work once they arrived in the New World. Spain was all about those colonies, especially the ones overflowing with gold and silver. But here's the thing about precious metals. They don't mine themselves. Enter enslaved Africans, forced to toil in horrific conditions, extracting wealth for the Spanish crown. We're talking mountains of silver, rivers of gold, all flowing directly into Spanish coffers. The profits from sugar, tobacco, and other cash crops grown on the backs of slaves added to their already overflowing coffers. This went on for centuries, from the late 1400s to the 1800s. Spain, flush with cash, became a global superpower, flexing its muscles across Europe and beyond. They built grand cathedrals, financed wars, and generally lived like the proverbial kings and queens they believed themselves to be. But let's not forget who truly paid the price for Spain's golden age.
Great Britain, the land of tea crumpets, and, oh yeah, the most efficient slave trading operation the world had ever seen. By the 18th century, they were the undisputed champions of human misery, transporting over 3 million Africans to their colonies in the Caribbean and North America. Britain had developed a real taste for sugar, but they also had a penchant for efficiency. They realized that shipping slaves across the Atlantic was essentially a numbers game. The more human beings they crammed onto those ships, the higher the profit margin. It was sickeningly simple and devastatingly effective. The money came pouring in, an estimated 120 billion pounds in today's money, from the slave trade and the plantation economies it fueled. This windfall of blood money laid the foundation for the Industrial Revolution. It built their factories, their railroads, their entire economic system. Many of their modern institutions, their banks, their insurance companies, they all have roots tangled up in the profits of this horrific trade. So next time you hear someone waxing poetic about Britain's glorious past, just remind them that those cobblestone streets, those stately manor houses, they were all built on a foundation of human suffering. It's enough to put a damper on your afternoon tea, isn't it? Chapter 4. France. From Sugar High to Bitter Truth. Now, let's cross the English Channel and pay a visit to France, shall we? The land of love, liberty, and, oh yes, a whole lot of slave-produced sugar. Saint-Domingue, later known as Haiti, was so profitable it was dubbed the Pearl of the Antilles. Why was it so profitable, you ask? It was a gold mine of sugar, coffee, and indigo, all produced by enslaved Africans. In the 18th century, Saint-Domingue supplied 40% of Europe's sugar and 60% of its coffee. This made France one of the richest nations in Europe. For about 300 years, France squeezed every last drop of profit from their colonies. But empires built on exploitation tend to crumble, and crumble they did, with Haiti leading the way. Chapter 5. The Netherlands. Tulip mania and the trade in human lives. Now, let's hop over to the Netherlands, known for windmills, tulips, and being ruthless slave traders. The Dutch were masters of mercantilism and knew a good deal when they saw one. They shipped over 500,000 enslaved Africans to their colonies in Suriname and the Caribbean. They crammed them onto ships and worked them to death on sugar plantations. The Dutch East and West India Companies became very wealthy. Amsterdam transformed into a global financial center, awash in cash from the slave trade. The Dutch Golden Age was built on unimaginable cruelty. They used the money to build their merchant fleets and fund their appetite for tulips. Those beautiful flowers were, in part, a product of the slave trade. Chapter 6. The United States. A nation built on cotton and contradictions. And now, we come to the United States, a nation founded on ideals of liberty and justice for all. Except, of course, if you were black. While the U.S. might not have invented the transatlantic slave trade, they embraced it with a fervor that would make even the most hardened slaver blush. The Southern economy, in particular, was built on the backs of enslaved Africans. Cotton, tobacco, sugar. These crops, the engines of the American economy, were fueled by forced labor, by the sweat and blood of millions. By 1860, cotton alone, produced almost entirely by enslaved Africans, made up 60% of U.S. exports. The total profit generated by slavery is difficult to calculate, but it's safe to say it's in the trillions of dollars in today's money. This wealth wasn't just confined to the South either. It flowed north, financing the Industrial Revolution, building railroads, factories, and banks. The entire nation, in one way or another, profited from the enslavement of black people. The legacy of this system? Well, it's still with us today, in the racial disparities in wealth, education, and opportunity. The echoes of slavery reverberate through American society, a constant reminder of the sins of the past. The legacy of slavery isn't some dusty history book footnote. It's alive, it's breathing, and it's shaping our world today. The nations that built their fortunes on the backs of enslaved Africans may have fancy buildings and impressive GDPs, but those gains came at a horrific cost. Acknowledging this past, confronting this ugly truth, is the first step towards building a better future. A future where we dismantle the systems of oppression that were built on the backs of enslaved Africans and strive for a world where equality and justice aren't just lofty ideals, but a lived reality. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below.